Warning, this podcast contains explicit sexual language and should only be listened to at work if you're looking for an excuse to connect with your HR representative. Additionally, all mentions of the word women include cis and trans women. For my friends who are genderqueer, gender fluid, figuring it out, anything in between, and feel like this conversation is also important for you, you are welcome here.
Will you open up with me? These pages, they can feed your innermost desires. Do you feel inspired? Are you getting what you need? Are you coming curiously? A secret safe with me. And here you can simply be yourself. Sweet romance. Come on in, come on in, come on.
Hi, y'all. This is Jace, she, they, and you found Jace Reads Romance, a community dedicated to empowering women about sex and sexuality through the reading of romance novels. It's book club day! Book club day. And if you were not aware, this book club episode is Dark City Omega, which I loved and absolutely foisted upon my guest, Wylie from All My Friends Are Reading. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Wylie, she, her. I have so many thoughts about this book. I'm really excited to talk about it. So I'm excited to be part of book club today. I'm a part of 4 book clubs in my normal life, so it's fun to be on like a kind of 5th book club.
Yes. So like number 1, she's so pretty. She's so great. Yes. Elizabeth Stevens is the author. She is a woman of color, and she has written a fantasy Omegaverse with a main character who is also a woman of color. And I inhaled the shit out of this book when it first came out. Or when I first read it. Not when it first came out. I didn't discover it back then, which is sad.
I was going to ask. I was like, I don't know when it came out.
No, I read it. Steffi and I were talking about it because she was like, why did you have to read it again? I reread it for this. I'm like, well, I read it back in June. And she's like, that's a while ago. And then I actually did some math. So this is technically book number like 200 and, oh goodness. Well, where did I put my information?
I think you said 221 or something close to there.
Oh my God. How many books have I read now? Oh no, this is book 243 this year. And I read it for the first time in June as book number, there we go, 142. So I've read 100 books in between, thank you, the first time I read this and now. So I definitely needed a reread.
Yeah, I would say so. That's a lot of different plots going through your head in a short amount of time.
So many books, but I've talked, and if y'all have not gone to my social medias and listened to my review of this book, you can go do that. You can press pause or you can find it later. Wylie, I would love to know what most excited you about this book before you delved into it, and also what were your overall likes or impression after reading it, and then we can get into the nitty gritty.
Okay, I'm really excited to get into nitty gritty because I have so many thoughts about so many things. But I think I was drawn to this book because you and I were talking about Omega romances, and I really love an Alpha Omega story. And you were like, well, I have this one that's really unique. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And so the powers that are in this book I found really, really interesting. So I overall just really enjoyed the unique take on this, because I do think Alpha and Omega ones can be very like Wattpad-y, for like lack of a better word, where it's kind of like, oh, you know what's going to happen exactly, and like it's a little too typical. And so this one I really like that it was outside of that mold. And so I do think I'll read the second book that she has coming. Or I think it is out. I think I have it on Kindle Unlimited.
It's out. It's out.
Okay.
It's wait, it isn't Kindle Unlimited, and my copy is over there. Like, where is
I did
it?
not
It's
read
over
the
there.
second one because I was like, do not get your plots confused. Like, just read this one and then we can read the second one.
I hear she told me when I met her in that there's some good groveling in the second book. So I'm very excited for that one.
I think I also was a little, okay, I don't know if this is like going too deep in detail. I'm a little wary because I know it's not about the same two main characters. And I really liked these two main characters. And I was like, what's the second one about?
I don't know. I don't actually know. I thought it's supposed to be a duology, I think. But anyway,
Wait.
now I want to do research. Oh, I feel like before we get into the nitty-gritty, I should warn everyone that we will be spoiling the ever-loving shit out of this book. So if you like going into a book not knowing things, then you probably shouldn't listen to this right now. Go read the book and then listen to this.
That's
Cool?
very different than like my podcast where I'm like, it's all the spoilers all the time.
I mean, I will ruin everything for you. So if you do not want it to be ruined, then you should probably pause, go read the book, and then come back to us.
That's very romance of you to be like, I'm going to ruin this for you.
I'm not gonna lie, I do love, it's one of those micro tropes that I love. Like, I'm gonna ruin you for other people. Or when someone says, you ruined me, I swoon. I do swoon.
I'm so into it. I really do love a trope of like a man who's just like very obsessed with his love interest. Every single time I'm just like, yes. Or when they say like my wife, I'm like, yes.
There's plenty of that in here.
I was pleased. I was on a plane coming home from New York and I was like, this is great.
He loves her so much. He loves her so much. Also, I do know who the second book is about, and we can chat about that. It's interesting.
You're like, I really have to know this right now.
I did. I really had to know it right now. So also, because I don't know if I recognize this in the first book, because if you go to KU, just 2 of the books are there. But in this physical book, look how many there are.
Okay, see, I was thinking, looking at that second book, I was like, I think she has a book for each of the like Omegas.
Yeah, there's gotta be, but it says, so my physical book has them all, but if you ask Amazon, there are only 2 of them, and now I want to know, you know what, I can find this out at the end. We'll figure this out. We will have answers for you. Hey, actually, Steffi, can you do some research and go to Elizabeth Stevens' website and have answers for us by the end of this episode? That would be even better. Okay.
Angel.
All right. Because people listen to me talk all the time, Wylie, would you like to give the overall plot of this story to those who are listening?
Would you like me to read like the summary on the back or just like my summary myself?
You are so sweet to give them the actual summary. No, I want you to like, from your feelings, what is this book about?
Okay, so pals, this book is kind of a dystopian romance. There's a world where there are 4 like hierarchies. Like we have Omega, Beta, Alpha, and then there's Berserkers, which are like the alphaiest alphas ever. And the Omegas in the society are all very coveted, as an Omega is wont to do. But Omegas in this world have powers. And if you, a Berserker, have an Omega, you are stronger and it's like good for like your kingdom, land. They use different words for like their cities. So this dystopian world, and we meet our main character, and she has just found out she was an Omega 6 weeks ago, and she's been on the run because she does not want to be caught, because if she's caught, she'll be claimed, and she doesn't want to be claimed. She doesn't want to obey a Berserker. But then she meets one, and it's their love story from there.
It's
And also in this
so
background of
great.
like fantastical magic, like what is keeping the world dystopian. Wait, can I say her powers?
Yes.
Okay, so she's basically kind of like a garden Omega. Like she has plants and she can like make trees and fruit. And she's kind of honestly this like Eve character, is what I've been imagining her throughout the whole book. I don't know if that's
Okay.
true, but I was like, oh, she's coming to this land and she's bringing like life and greenery. I was like, the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. So I love this. For those of you who have been listening, you know me. I'm normally a PNR person. So fantastical creatures, magic in our world. And I am loving this next level of fantasy where I've been seeing so many more fantasy books taking what I love from PNR but putting it into these new worlds. So they're not constrained by the reality of Earth and humanity and all of that. There are no humans in this world. There are just these two islands that we deal with. And as far as I know, there's nothing else on the entire planet besides these two islands. And I love that because it allows, I found that for me, it allows me to really suspend my disbelief and be immersed in the magic and the system without putting my own expectations on it. Does that make sense? Do you feel like that?
I don't look at maps. Each world
I
in my
don't.
head looks the exact
Oh,
same.
no.
They'll be like, this is to the west. And I'm like, sure.
I look at maps and then I completely forget about it and I have no concept of where everything is in time or space. But all I know is there's a world and it has two islands on it and nothing else is ever mentioned. And so as far as I know, that's the entire planet is these two little islands. It's like the Little Prince, but bigger.
I also do understand that like because she has made this world where only these people exist, we get to like understand their society from like their lens and not
Yeah.
like from my like human perspective in the real world. Because I think like in a Bride, she sets it in America, and I was like, that's
Yeah.
that just took me out. I just pretended they weren't in America anymore.
That was PNR. So in our world is where I started, and that's what I'm used to. That's what I've been reading. Black Dagger Brotherhood, Laurel K. Hamilton, Carolyn Sparks, Lindsay Sands, all of them take place in our world. That's my definition of PNR. So when we get fantasy, which is a completely different world, a completely different universe, I think it both puts a lot more work for the author, but also gives them the freedom to create whatever the fuck they want. It's exciting. And how are you going to envision this? And also, these islands must be really big because you have different types of weather at different cities. So anyway, one of the things that I think about with Echo, who is our FMC, that's the name of this Omega, is she is longing and fighting for freedom. And that is her main drive. And the reason she's on the run, number one, she gets kicked out of the beta compound. So everybody starts off as a beta. Everybody's born a beta. And then you either stay a beta, who, depending on where you are, kind of second-class citizens, or you ascend into an alpha, which is about 50%, I think they said. Berserkers, who are the alphiest alphas and have a completely different, they're the ones who actually transform into like monsters, like werewolves. And then even rarer are omegas. And once an omega is bonded either to a berserker or to a pack of alphas, sometimes alphas will band together to lead and, put by their powers combined.
Just like Captain Planet.
Yeah.
Powers combined.
We will bond an omega. Once they're bonded, not bound, bonded, they develop these powers. And what we learn is Echo has been on the run because she does not want to get bonded. She does not want to be subservient, to be able to be ordered, especially a berserker. If they bond an omega, they can order the Omega to do things and the Omega must submit. And that is Echo's worst nightmare. So she has been on the run for 6 weeks. She is hiding out in this dystopian wasteland called Paradise Hole. It's not paradise at all.
Some would say a hellhole.
A hellhole, exactly. It's like ironic, which there are some, they start the chat, every chapter starts with the number, whose point of view it is, and then where it is. And I do love the commentary that appears like, Paradise Hole again, still in fucking Paradise Hole. So when she is finally caught, when our MMC Adam appears in his berserker form and finds her, what does she fucking do? She stabs herself in the femoral artery to die because she'd rather die than get bonded. I loved it. I love that. So badass. She is a scrappy, scrappy thing. And as you can imagine, that is not really the best start to a love story.
Some would say.
Stabbing
yourself to get away from somebody, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. Oh, and then he so you bond by biting, and if you're a berserker, venom, and then you're supposed to heal. But something that we learned, and I'm like, dude, how did you not know this? Is we're ruining so many things for you. The only way to bond actually is to be invited to bond. Was he invited to bond? No, he was not. No, he was not. She's bleeding out because she doesn't want to bond him. And he's like, shit, I got to save her. My venom will save her. And so he bites her all over the place to try and save her. And it doesn't work. I mean, it kind of works because she doesn't
really,
die, but not really. Yeah. But so the bonding doesn't work. And his own feelings of inadequacy plague him. He's like, no, I'm terrible.
I don't think she knew that either, that they have to be invited to bond. That really wasn't clear. And it turns out that Adam had been searching for her for weeks because she thought she was doing a great job of hiding, but there was rumors about a redhead Omega in the forest. And so he was trying to get to her before anybody else did.
Right. And something else we learned about Adam is he was told by the Fates, we don't need to get into them yet, that he would meet his Omega in the forest and she would be a red-headed Omega in Paradise Hole. So when he heard those rumors, there probably had spies being like, if you hear anything about a red-headed Omega in Paradise Hole, let me know. He immediately went out to go find her and, killed every alpha or berserker that was also on their way to find her as well. So,
romantic.
So romantic. I'm going to kill everything that keeps me from you.
Oh, I love it. I also like that the Fates were so descriptive with him. She's going to be redheaded. She's going to be in the forest. You're going to find her. It's I love those instructions for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Don't you wish that all fortune tellers were that specific and accurate?
Yes. Don't give me this double meaning BS. Please just tell me what my fate is.
I don't want to interpret it. I don't want it to be vague. I would like to know when and where. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you. Next.
I will also say his name being Adam and her name being Echo really does play into Adam Eve imagery.
Eve. I know. They are y'all, by the time they get back, if they are not fighting, they're fucking. Just that it's so real. If they're not fighting, they're fucking. It's almost toxic. I mean, I wouldn't say this is the healthiest relationship at times, given where it started, but it has potential. And he loves her from the start, just falls head over heels in love with her from the minute that they meet. And he will burn the world down to protect her.
Which, I feel like he did do a lot of things for her, which end up later, there's a bad thing he did, but, we'll get there. But I was, the amount of people that he threatened, he killed, and their journey back to, his homeland was just, very treacherous and everything they were figuring out.
It was forced proximity, I think, in one of the best ways. She's basically his captive. Like, she's basically his captive on this trek back to Dark City, where he is the leader. And they have to cross Paradise Hole, and they are attacked, and they have to flee and fight and survive. And their bonding isn't correct. And so these powers don't exist yet for Echo. And then suddenly they do. And we get the first moments of his ordering, like, Echo, I'm going to order you to do this or not do this. Be quiet, save us. It's really interesting. Her powers manifest almost unconsciously. She does nothing to purposefully build flowers or move the river. But when they're both injured, so they get attacked and they are both injured, they fall into a river, and Adam orders her to get them to shore. And so her powers just do what her berserker told her to do and push them up onto the shore. And he, drugged out of his mind from these darts, pulls her to safety. And as they like fall asleep with each other, her powers build them a cocoon to protect them and keep them warm. Like, that's so beautiful and romantic.
So there's one part I want to go back to. I like looked back through my
Yes.
notes. So when he bites her to try and save her, he then takes her to like Trash City, which is this place where betas are like basically living amongst alphas in like secrecy. It's literally in a pile of trash. Trash City. And so she's being healed there because her arm is like horribly mangled.
She also got shot. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
She also shoot her. Like, he bit her neck and her thigh because she stabbed herself in the thigh. He bit her to like get the venom to heal her, and then she got shot. So it's been a day.
It's been a day for her. And it wasn't him that shot her. It was like these other alphas that were like trying to claim her. Yes. So it was like he found her. She tried to stab herself. And then all these alphas were like, well, now I want this Omega that I have found. So there's this scene where he's trying to convince her to like leave Trash City with him.
Yeah.
And first off, apparently he sounds, I think, Irish a little bit. Like they're talking about his accent.
Some accent. I imagined it as Boston.
Okay, that's also good. In my head was like, it was Irish or like Scottish. So that's what I was imagining in my head.
Funny. I imagined it as like Boston, or if it were something British, it's definitely Scouse. Like nothing high class.
No, yeah, it's very like he does not sound super smart or like like he has an Oxford education because that's where the smartest people go to school. And she's like threatening to like gut somebody, and he's like, doesn't matter to me. Like I'm leaving here with you or not at all. And she's like, you don't own me. And he goes, not true. Bonded ya, paid these fuckers for your life. And I just love that he's like, just like having this standoff with her. And then like the other people around her are like, just let him go. And he's like, don't talk to my Omega. Like we're handling it. Like, I love that he's like, I don't need your help. She's going through her emotions and I've got it.
Also, like, I can talk shit to I can boss my Omega around. You cannot boss my Omega around at all. Thank you, sir.
I just was like, this is where I think I really was like, oh wait, I really do like him.
I think I liked him from the beginning, which says a lot about me. I don't mind absolute disaster of a real relationship if for some reason there's a paranormal element to it. So in dubcon, non-con, dark romance, not my fave. But oh no, my hormones just tell me I have to fuck you, even though like my brain doesn't want to. That's fine. Totally fine with me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
present to my berserker? Yes, you do.
Okay, this berserker, he then like ties her shoes because she can't tie her own shoes. And she goes like too tight and she says, no, because she's about to cry. And he goes, you crying? She goes, no. He goes, don't lie to me, Echo. And I just was like, Ah!
I love them so much. It's just like they're both so much a product of their upbringing. So Echo has her own history, and we honestly don't get a ton into it other than she mainly was with betas and lived amongst them. We get some of Adam's where he, before he ascended as a berserker, was held captive and tortured.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they've got a lot of baggage and trauma together, having to do with their place in the world. And something that I found interesting, and both like beautiful and really frustrating, was Adam is the leader of Dark City. He took over, killed the previous berserker, and just kind of let things continue on as they were. But once Echo is in the picture, he's like, oh shit, why? I was a victim of this system and know how unfair it is. Why didn't I change it? But looking at the system and the city through Echo's eyes, he like realizes, oh my gosh, this isn't fair. And oh my gosh, I have the power to change it,
Mhm.
and I will for you. And that was a side plot that I found beautiful, because frustrating, like, dude, you knew it was unjust to begin with. Why the fuck didn't you change it when you ascended and when you took over? But that his eyes were opened, and not that like the love of a good woman can fix everything, but his eyes were opened, and he doesn't just talk out of his ass. He starts to make changes in this book and openly admits, like, I don't know how this is going to work. All I know is that this needs to happen. And I really appreciated that kind of that shift, but also the vulnerability of not knowing how the system was going to change, just acknowledging that it had to, and that he was going to and actively worked to change it.
Well, and I think in hearing that, I think my two thoughts are, one, I think when we love people, we are moved to change, right? He was
Yeah.
like, if Echo is going to be my wife, which she says, I'm not your wife until we are fully equal. He's like, well, then I'm going to
Yeah.
change the world so that you are fully my equal. Like, you are my equal to me, but you're not my equal in society. And so he wants to like change things for her, which is like, ugh,
Yeah.
love.
It's
And then I think he also keeps the system as it is, because I think you talked about earlier his inadequacy of being a berserker. And the only way he knows how to be a berserker is like this tough, loud man who's like the strongest in the world, who's like uses his body for strength and everything. And he doesn't think beyond like how he has seen
yeah,
berserkers be.
it's true.
And then his
The one thing
trauma of losing his sister. That was
oh
sad.
God. Yeah. So Adam had a sister who was an Omega, and she was taken from him, and as far and to these other Omegas who suck the soul out of new Omegas to prolong their life.
It's
I
very
am
Sanderson sisters.
ooh, yes. I'm really intrigued to see where that storyline goes in the
Same.
next book, because they're like, is she under control? Is she acting of her own free will? What's happening with Noon? That's his sister's name, Noon. Like, I don't know.
Are we at that point where we can spoil what happened to Noon? Because that part
Yes.
like fucked me
Oh,
up.
the minute that I have in both of my readings, the minute so Adam's like, there are 4 fates, and Echo's like, we were told there were 5 fates. I'm like, Noon's a fate. Like both times I'm like, sorry, sir, it's 5. You're wrong.
It was
Would
mentioned
you like
enough
to?
times where I was like, Noon exists somewhere. Because they also talked about
Yes.
that she had a very important power. So
Mm-hmm.
these 4 fates essentially belong to another berserk in a city who's described as being
Yeah.
like essentially immortal. They're like, he's lived for like hundreds of
300
years.
years. Yeah.
And at one point, like the fates are all together and Echo like looks at the eyes of this man, this berserker who she's told
Yeah.
does not really exist. And she notices it that the body is being worn like a mask and Noon is
Yes.
in his body controlling the body. And it seems like the other fates are controlling Noon.
Yes.
So it's like his reanimated like flesh corpse body and she's in it.
It's like Edgar in Men in Black, the Edgar suit. It's so creepy.
Ugh.
By the cockroach.
And then I don't even know if she's like an adult or if she's still the 8-year-old that was like taken.
Well, I don't think she can stay 8. It's been long enough. Like she's got to be an adult. She's just tiny, apparently, because she can hide in the suit.
But isn't her like whole thing is she like reanimates the dead or something? Like she has some sort of like ghost dead power.
She's the death. She's got death as her power, which kind of confused me because Freya, this absolutely feral, and I don't mean like, ooh, a feral man. No, like legitimately like naked in the woods feral. Omega can't reanimate corpses herself, but she says something like her powers are crazier than mine. I'm like, dude, you can't reanimate corpses, or maybe you've just never tried, but this death Omega is different than you, who is like an Omega whose powers lie in animals and healing.
Yeah, she describes it as being like people being on a shore, and sometimes they're really close to the shore, and sometimes they're too far away from the shore. And the people who are too far away from the shore, she just lets go. And that was one thing for Echo. She was like, well, why wouldn't you bring them back to life? And she's like, it's not the good same for them.
I was worried if we were going to have a, it's such a trope, but the one that's just coming to mind is Shadow and Bone moment where she brought Adam back after he was almost killed by his sister. And she was like, they never come back the same. I'm like, oh no, don't bring Adam back changed and covered in darkness. Or it doesn't seem like that, because also the next book is in fact not about them. And I'm now sad, but I can tolerate it.
I know. I was like, are you going to be background characters? Because I will say I actually am not the biggest fan of when it's like worlds have multiple like
interconnected standalones.
Well, like, you know, where there's like a friend group and then it's each friend in the group's love story.
Interconnected standalones.
I'm not super into that. I'm like, I can't tell you why. What about it doesn't like bring me a lot of joy, but I would rather just read a different romance book entirely.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
With that statement, can I jump in? Because I did find
yes, please.
The information on Elizabeth Stevens' website.
Tell me.
The Beasts of Gadamora, which is the series that we are discussing today, is a 5-book series of interconnected standalone male-female romances. I just thought that was a good time to jump in there with that info. Okay.
Yes, it is.
You know, I assumed that. Sorry,
have they been released yet, or just these 2?
Just these 2, according to her website.
Okay, because she has all 5 listed in this book. If you want to know what they're called, it's Dark City Omega, Shadowlands Omega, Fallen Omega, Gang Mountain Omega, Glass Flats Omega.
You know, if you've read Ice Planet Barbarians, you know how it's just a different trope each book.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just find the one that has my favorite trope. But there's like a lot of plot in this one, so maybe you can't do that.
I don't know if you can do that one. If it's all of the fighting, but do you like standalones, or do you like following a couple over multiple books? I'm curious.
Both. I think I get really attached to that relationship. And so then when I see that character now as a side character, there's something about it that I don't love. So like if we think about like SJM and like her Court of Thorn and Roses series, when it gets to Cassian and like Nesta, I didn't actually finish that book personally, but I was kind of like, I don't really care.
I stopped after 2. I'm good with it. I'm okay with
the
it.
second one in the Court and Thorn and Roses is the best of that series.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm mad. I don't like it. I'm done.
I mean, that's so fair. I just am saying, like, you hit the one that like is actually good,
I
and
hit
the other ones, who cares?
Amazing. If that was the best one, then I'm even happier I stopped.
She's doing this thing where she's doing like a Avenger style, all her universes come together, and I don't do that either. I'm like, keep it separate.
No, friend, I'm good.
Well,
friend, I'm real good.
If you don't want to hear about the books, you can always listen to my podcast, All My Friends Are Reading, where we're going to give you the summary of each book.
Are you going to go through the whole thing of it?
I'm going to go through the first 3, and then my friend who loves the Cassie and Nesta one, she's going to read it to me.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, yeah, go to All My Friends Are Reading, because I read A Court of Thorn and Roses before I started sharing reviews, and I never want to do that to my brain again. I did read the second one, and I also never want to do that to my brain again. So there are plenty of other ways that you can listen to that book. Ugh.
Well,
back to the one that I actually like. What?
I was going to ask, are we at the like sexy part of Dark City Makeup? Because I have a lot of thoughts about the sexy parts.
Yes, please. That's my favorite part.
Okay. I love how she doesn't flinch away from how dirty sex is. Like, there's a lot of times, like where they're hooking up in the woods and they have not had a shower in a while, and he like talks about like her like dirty pussy, and then like he like kisses her and she's like, it tastes nasty, because like they both haven't brushed their teeth and stuff. And it was just one of those things where I was like, yeah, it is gross, but this is also kind of hot.
This is the moment where, like, if any person tells you that they don't want to taste your pussy, fuck off, because they are not attracted enough. You know what? You know what pussy should taste like? Fucking pussy. Like, I don't want it to taste like bar soap. I don't want it to taste. It's the same thing. I was thinking about this. Like, no one ever talks about like dicks taste weird. Like, dicks have their own smell and taste and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one ever talks about the fact that like, oh, dicks are kind of weird. They have a weird taste. But you know what? If you like dick, you don't mind when a dick tastes like a dick or smells like a dick. Like, it just doesn't fucking matter.
Well, and I think musk is used a lot for like dick, and they're like, oh, it's a really potent musk. And I'm like, so it smells like sweat? I was like,
I mean, it does.
And we get like really excited about like that. So I think I liked in here that it was explicitly dirty, but then I think I also enjoyed. So I think sometimes with like sex in books, we get a lot of like euphemisms, and something about the explicitness and just straightforward of this, I was like hot. Cause like what they were talking about his dick at one time just being like red and veiny. And I was like, I don't think I hear that a lot in romance books. And I was like, hot?
She described, so the first time they have sex, which again, look, I don't mind a hormone fueled, I can't help it because I'm an Omega and you are my berserker, even though in my right mind I would never consent to fucking you situation. They are in that in the cocoon, yes. So they're in the cocoon and she is overwhelmed and she's like, I present to my berserker, which is apparently that's the phrasing that is used. And both of them, so we get both sides of that sex scene in 2 different chapters. We get both points of view. And in both chapters, she describes his penis as being bloated, like the bloated head of his penis. Where is it? Because I have it highlighted both times. I'm like, where did this go? Oh yeah, bloated head, same adjective in both penis, which is so interesting to me. Like, number one, okay. And number 2, that both of them would use the same adjective to describe his penis.
I haven't heard bloated a lot. I've heard swollen a lot.
Yes. Swollen is, I think, more normal. Like, swollen is something that's filled. Like, bloated. Not that I didn't mind it, but when I heard it, when I read it back to back, I went, What? Also, normally I don't assume that I would use the same descriptors to describe someone's penis as they would use it to describe their own penis.
It's a great question. I'll
So
start running a survey. Like, I have
Penis-
adjectives I will use to describe you during sex. What adjectives do you use to describe yourself during sex?
as long as it's not Charlie.
Yeah, as long as it's not Charlie, I'm pretty open.
We're good.
Like,
But
I really don't mind member. I'm like, okay.
I don't mind pretty much anything anymore. Like I'm now I've read enough that there's very little that can shock me. But I do remember the first time I read a cunt and I was like, I mean, this is a very long time ago, but I remember that first time and being so scandalized, and now I don't care at all. But this line, oh my gosh. She's like, she's not very experienced, which I find adorable and he finds adorable. And she's like kissing him and she goes, "You taste like snow." And his response is, "You taste like sin." And we get that from her point of view first. But in his point of view chapter, the moment is, "You taste like sin." I lie, because she doesn't. She tastes like redemption. Oh! Look, Seffi's just nodding in the background, like, yes, sir. It's so adorable and heartbreaking. And oh my God, I love Adam so much. I know Seffi and I have talked about this, but in their sex scene, I find that if any external clit stimulation happens, it's usually someone's hand reaching down. And I loved this moment. She does this a couple different times, but the first time in the cocoon, they're literally in a cocoon. It's very small space. But this is what he does. He moves in brutal jerks for a while before he slows down and grinds against me, moving his hips in a figure 8 motion so that his pubic bone and the hairs dusting it smash against my clit. It's pure nirvana. And yeah, dude, sometimes your dick just going in and out is not enough. Like, the motion of the ocean can do some real important stuff there.
I like that he purrs for her. I'm very into like the purring and like that soothing idea that like what gives her comfort is just his like chest and purr. I'm like, oh, love this.
Yeah. Oh, there's
but then
another. Like,
he does not orgasm in this place because he's like, I don't want to enter into my rut. And she's like offended. She's like, you just did this because I was like pathetic and needed some horniness. And it's like, in his perspective, he's like, I couldn't give her that. Like,
respecting her.
Yeah, so she doesn't enter her heat so we can get back where she needs medical care.
It's unbelievable to me how both of them have these absolute beliefs of their own inadequacy. They're completely convinced that they are not worthy and that every action the other does just plays into that and is like a self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh, you did that, it's because I'm not worthy. Oh, you did that, it's because, oh my God, this was a moment where I'm like, dude, you just need to like, don't hold her in this belief any longer. But when he first calls her his wife or something, like she gets it into her head that he doesn't want her because he won't finish in her. And she is convinced that he has a spouse or something back in Dark City. And God, so she's like, your wife wouldn't like it. And he's like, yeah, my wife. Because in his mind, he's like, you know, you're my wife. And then no, she doesn't. She truly believes that he is with someone else and just using her as a power play. And so it takes like quite a while and quite a few mentions of this misunderstanding for him to be like, nah, girl, you're my wife. And I'm like, do you know how much emotional agony she went through because of that? Fuck off.
It did frustrate me. I was like, just communicate that she's your wife, which they do
Yes,
get married
that
at the end, so she's
they
officially
do.
wife.
Like
And
real,
he's
they wife
husband.
up. They have 2 interludes or whatever while they're on the journey back to Dark City. And then they actually, the next time we get any little bit of description, it's right before she actually goes into heat. Did it frustrate you that we didn't get any of the heat? Because I was like, dude, we nodded once. You came in her and then you went into Rut and then 6 days passed and you created a garden. Where was any of that?
I wanted to see him chase her. He was like, I
Yes.
roared and gave chase. I was like, you didn't make it very far. You were right outside the house.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's probably really fast. But
I
it
was like,
just,
I want that.
why did you fade to black here?
We could have cut out so much of the like traveling through Paradise Hole. Like we could have lost a chapter or two to gain a chapter or two here. I would have been fine.
Yes. I wanted more of that because they actually connected. And I mean, if you're fucking
in
for
her
6
little
days straight.
nest.
Oh, that was so adorable. I love that because she clearly had no idea what a nest was. And she's like, shit, I'm supposed to put a bunch of blankets on the floor. And then when she actually went into heat, she created this beautiful garden. Her powers without her knowledge, just went out of her and created this incredible garden space. That's her nest. Like, it's not these blankets on the floor. It's this thing she created out of their connection. And
I loved it. I will say, I think one of the things in terms of like their sexual relationship, and maybe this is about berserkers and omegas and how they're treated,
yeah.
is I didn't always love how open their sexual relationship was with other people around. Like where she'd be getting aroused, they'd be like, berserker, chill out. We're all like responding to her, like getting like hot. And at one point he like fingers her in front of a bunch of other alphas.
Yeah.
And I could tell where there was some sort of like maybe like exhibitionist feelings with her where she's like, oh, I kind of like this, but also it's like very weird.
Yeah.
For me, I think there was a part of it where I was like, maybe it's just I have secondhand embarrassment because I also know when I read Fourth Wing and Xaden and Violet, spoilers for Fourth Wing, but I feel like if you're listening to this, you probably read Fourth Wing. Like they're like making out at one point and their friends are like, okay, you want to stop now? And as soon as that happened, I lost it. I was like, oh, nope, this is awkward. I can't do it. So there was something in me when they're having some of this like back and forth where I'm like, people are watching. I'm embarrassed. Oh my God.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I think for me, I didn't mind that. I'm like, wow. What I didn't like is, hey, I'm going to get you aroused, send you off to the bathroom to finish yourself off so you get out of my way and I can keep you safe from from the fates and the berserker. I was like, I don't like how you manipulated her with sex. But I've read so many other Omega verses that are way more public and exhibitionist that this one, I'm like, this is pretty tame for me.
Which totally understand that exists and like Omega verse world. I think it was like the people around them commenting about it, being like, okay, like chill. I think I was like, oh, okay, please chill. People are uncomfortable.
That's such a valid point and a feeling of like, oh, wow. Is it that people are commenting or that the arousal can be smelled and felt? That's
a great question. I think it was like his little like inner circle when she was in the room and they were all that part. And then later when he's
in the tree
when they're like, all right, everybody file out. It's just like something about them commenting that like, this is kind of weird. We're going to leave or stop that. I think for me was like, oh my God, like you have to stop. People are like not into it. I think if they are all like into it, maybe it would have been a little different, but I think there's a part of my like socialness as like maybe I was like,
it didn't bother me at all because of how many books I've read that's just part of the situation. And I kind of loved those moments because it was like, oh, they can't resist each other. They just have to get hot. And I'm like, yeah, you get yours.
Even as a child, I could not handle secondhand embarrassment. I would run out of the room if something on TV happened that was embarrassing. So maybe that's just me being like, my secondhand embarrassment can't handle it.
I can't handle it either, except apparently when it comes to sex, because I was totally fine with sex.
You're like,
I know,
my
Steffi.
hotness
I know.
lever goes like over the feeling of awkwardness.
Like if she trips and falls and like spills something, I'm dead. If she's about to like bone, totally fine.
She trips and falls on a dick. It's totally fine.
I love it. Trips and falls on a dick. It's one of my favorite microtropes. Just unexpected penis.
There was in that same tree scene, he rips the crotch out of her pants, and this is never described again as being fixed for the rest of the book. I'm like, is her pussy just out? Like, what's happening?
I had the same question when I was rereading it. Like, wait, you're putting your clothes back on, but like, did you zip? How did you zip or button up those pants? I don't understand.
Sewing somewhere. This is the thing that happens. Like, if in a book, like they open a door and it's never said that it's closed. In my head, I'm like, close the door. The door. Close it.
Like, here's he rips a hole in the crotch and oh no, it's back there. That's him getting his own off. But he goes, fuck, where's your underwear? And she goes, where's yours?
And so I was like, there's really nothing there.
Yeah.
Which, like, hot, but then also later when she's sitting and like trying to give this like leader speech, I'm like, are you just sitting there, pussy out?
Oh my gosh. And we only get one experience of explicit nodding. Like, this is I think what annoyed me about this book is not annoyed me about this book, but it is something that I was like, oh, please, that we got such a great description of that first scene in the cocoon, like their feelings, their experience. Like, I don't know about you, but when I read that figure 8 motion, I was like, oh, I know exactly how that feels. Like, that's so great. Like, good on you, sir.
Highlight,
save for later. And I felt like so many scenes after that were not explicitly described. I'm like, what? Why? Like, why did we that scene specifically in the tree, he pulls out his erection on page 411, and then the scene ends on page 412. Like, fade to black. Like, our leaves crinkle as they come to life inside the tree trunk, and our voices repeating a quiet mantra over and over. I hate you, Adam, I tell him, and his response again. Oh, I love that too. But like, that's it. We get half a page of description of that sex scene. And so we started off so strong, and I feel like it petered out as the book went on. I didn't want to peak early.
No, that's fair, because then I am wondering, I know some people use the explicitness of sex for the plot or like to like help indicate something, and I don't know why these two kind of big moments for them fade to black, whereas like the first one wasn't a fade to black.
The first one wasn't. The one by the fire wasn't, again, where he didn't come, but like gave her a ton of orgasms. And then we got the one where they nodded, sent him into a rut, and faded to black on the whole 6 days of her heat.
Maybe she'll release a novella, please.
Oh my gosh, yes, please. Please do so. I would appreciate that so much. What am I going to say? Do you have any other thoughts?
Maybe something I didn't love about the book was kind of, well, I guess we've not talked about the fact that he had this whole freak out and like chained her to the bed because he was like, I'm going to go fight this evil and you will stay here safe. And it was like, no. We do not chain our lovers to the bed without consent.
Yep. It was... so their bonding is so intriguing because they didn't really bond in their initial meeting. And when they get back to Dark City, he is grievously injured. And they separate the two of them. And they have tied her up in a room. And he's tied down in a medical space to get medical attention. And when he finally comes to, because he's been out of it, he was so grievously injured, he, tears the handrail off the bed, drags it behind him as he goes to find her. And so she has been separated from him, freaking out, like rubbing her wrists raw on these chains. And so we know that their separation, regardless of how successful the bonding had been, caused pain, emotional pain to Echo. And then he chains her up. Oh God, there's this like weird, we could get into the collaring, but we don't need to get into the collaring. And he chains her and leaves her, like knowing that it's going to hurt her, knowing that he does this damage. And it sucked and it was hard and led to her feelings of like, I don't love you anymore. I hate you. And then at the end, she's like, no, I never stopped loving you. I'm like, well, come on, girl.
It happened a little quickly. I was like, I need him to grovel a little bit longer. That was a pretty big invasion of trust.
I mean, he almost died.
Yeah, but like, I feel like we could have maybe extended that part out a little bit further, like have a few more days of groveling. That'd be my favorite.
Of groveling, of just showing more that he was changing and building things. He does create his own collar out of the vines that she grew. So she wakes up one morning and he's got a collar around his neck. And I was like, that's real hot. That's real hot.
Yes, I forgot about that. I cannot believe I forgot about that. And I was like,
and keeps it on for days. Keeps it on for days. He protects it during the fights. And then at their marriage ceremony, she like disintegrates it. Yeah,
because it's almost like it's very submissive for him to do. So I can imagine that being kind of a, maybe not like humiliating experience, but definitely a weird experience to do in front of this other major berserker that is there and like seeing him, and he's wanted to be like a true berserker. And here he is like really upsetting the status quo wearing this. So like, I feel like that took a lot of courage to do.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that it's one of those grand gestures that is subtle, but speaks really well to this community and to like what's going on. There's a ladybug in my office.
You're blessed.
Thank you. I think it's that somehow bugs started living in here and a ladybug was like lunchtime, but it's like, I don't normally see it, but it's like right there. Sorry, I feel like distracted by the ladybug.
No, I love bugs. Can I tell you, I won trivia the other night because the last few bonus questions were about bugs.
Ooh.
And I won.
Good for you.
Thank you so much.
Something that we don't really have time to get into, but I do want to acknowledge it in this book, is this series and this world seems to be a world without racism.
Oh, yeah.
And I've mentioned it in... It's an observation that I took from Black Love Matters, that anthology, but in order to create a story that can be wholly centered around love, you have to take away the bigger conflict, which is always racism. And that was really interesting to me because race is mentioned, and it's really mainly like black and white, but no one is better. There's no hierarchy. There's none of that history in this world. And I think it's really interesting to acknowledge that she created a world with diversity and no racism for this book, and that the inequalities come from the status, not from that. From like the patriarchy, because, women are submissive. Women in certain cities are second-class citizens or alpha beta, that situation, but it's not. But it's not racism.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did not pick up on that. But now you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's yeah.
Right. And it's such a privilege to be able to read this and, not think about it. But I can imagine someone who sees himself in Echo, like in this world, and sees no one commenting on how other people look in any way, shape, or form. It's just how they look, must be so healing and so freeing. Like, you can immerse yourself in this story because you know that, yeah, they're not safe because there's an army of dead zombie alphas out to get them, but they're not unsafe because of the color of their skin. So, interesting world.
I think maybe after this conversation, I think I will read the second one. I'll give it a shot.
It's right over there. So I'll read it. Mine's right over there. I'll read it. Right, Ladybug?
Right, Tiger?
Okay. Are there any last thoughts, questions, things that you want to share? Overall, did you like this book?
I did like this book. I think I really enjoyed the premise of this book, and I really enjoyed the characters in this book. I think I ended up giving it like a 4 out of 5 stars on, because I think I thought the pacing was a little disjointed. Like, the first half took really long, the second half was really short, and I felt like the pacing could have been better, but I really liked it. I think if people like Alpha Omega romances, like, I think this is a really good one to check out.
This is such a fun one for me, especially if that in our world aspect is not for you. The fantasy part of this was so much fun. I'm so glad you read it, that when I threw it out there, Wylie, you were like, yes, let's read this together.
The sexiest book we've had on my podcast so far is Ice Planet Barbarians. And I know it's interesting hearing like people like interact with this world and like have like, oh, like it's a little different. And then I'm reading Dark City Omega for this podcast, and I was like, oh, I love it. And it's so much more like deeper, intense, has more to it. And I was like, I'm so excited to be talking about this book.
There's nothing wrong with Ice Planet Barbarians.
Love them.
There's so many of them. I've only read the first one, but that's a book that is 200, maybe 300 pages. This is 470 pages. It's just different.
Yeah, and I think Ice Planet Barbarians is a really good like entryway into kind of this like paranormal romance, and this is one I feel like I think you almost need a little bit of background if you're going to go into it, because I think if this was your first kind of like Omega romance, you'd be like, I'm confused. There's a lot of things I gotta assume and know about this world.
I liked, and this is the thing about pretty much anything, any PNR, any fantasy, especially with PNR, everyone is going to have a different interpretation of how the world works. And sometimes with PNR, because it's within our world, it's almost harder to suspend your disbelief. When you have a fantasy and it's a completely different world, you're like, well, fuck it. It's like jaywalking might be legal. Like, you don't know. And it's totally valid that there are motorcycles and horses and people who have medieval style dungeons and a trash city, because it's not our world. I would argue that this is a great fantasy Omegaverse to start with, because it's fairly simple in its world. It's like, it's not MPreg. Like, let's put it out. It's not MPreg.
That's fair.
And you can just let everything else go. It focuses on this story and pretty much this story alone. And Ice Planet Barbarians is almost the same way. It's an alien planet. You just gotta suspend your disbelief that humans have been captured and now she's on a planet and the blue guy glows and purrs at her. That's it.
I think of the Ice Planet Barbarian as being a more wackadoodle plot.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, sure. I think maybe I just think everyone should be introduced to like Alpha Omega romance as I was at 16 with unrestricted internet access and really into Twilight fan fiction.
So I have still never read fanfic.
I was reading
I was reading romance novels. Like, I read those already. I was like, what do I need this internet for? It's dialed up. Like, I'm already reading explicit paranormal werewolves.
I just think of the things that you have read that I know about. And I think if there's a fandom that you like to be obsessed with, it is such a fun feeling to get all those romance tropes out of a fandom that you're already obsessed with.
I I'm gonna have to take your word on it. I think I'm like, not that it's not great, but I'm wondering if I missed the boat. Like if it's now too late for me for fanfic, and
Can I
there's
jump
nothing
in as a fanfic author? Because
I know.
yeah.
And we're like meeting a celebrity.
The best thing about fanfic, Jace, is that it takes your fandom and you can do whatever you want with it. So, like, if a character dies in canon, like in the original story, in fanfiction,
Yeah.
fuck that, it never happened. Like, you can do whatever you want. And that I think is the biggest draw with fan fiction. At least it was for me when I was writing it.
Yeah.
So
If I get a book I really, really like, I will go on fan fiction and read like 15 different versions of it because I'm like, I'm so obsessed with this world right now.
Okay, this is where like I'm the weirdo apparently. I just make up those fantasies in my head and I like lie there at night. So oh my god. So
But just imagine there's like 15 of you all having the same idea and all writing my wife.
I'm gonna drop this in there for everyone to know. And this was before like dial-up internet. So I missed the boat on cons. I've never gone to one. I've never experienced this that I know, like Comic-Cons or anything. I didn't go to book conventions until this year, but I was obsessed with Xena Warrior Princess. And
Classic.
oh my gosh, so great. Like I have the DVDs still. And the number of fantasies that I have about Kevin Smith, the one who played Ares, not the other dude, is obscene. The ways that I have thought about that man. And when I found out that he died, I was devastated, like as a human.
That is,
but yeah,
you know, it sounds
I'm
like you
sure
have a
there are
beautiful
things out
creative
there, but I'm like, my imagination already did that. Like, what do I need to read yours for? Because I was there in my brain and you don't want to know what we did together.
I think like I was just talking to a friend about how I miss having like obsessions like I did in middle school where it was like my whole identity. And so because like you just don't have time for that like as an adult, you know, you also your emotion brain isn't bigger than your, you know, thinking brain. So
yeah.
I think that's what I like about fan fiction is just the opportunity to like let everything go crazy.
I'll get there one day, I promise. But
I mean, you don't have to. It sounds like your imagination's so good. I like your imagination. You're very creative.
Thank you.
Sorry, Stephanie.
I tried. They're used to it from me. Okay, but as we conclude, there are 5 questions that I ask every new guest. And the first one is, what is your favorite romance novel?
This is a great question. I'm going to go back to like the one that holds my heart, and it's like Anne Mallory books. Those are my first romance books I read that were like romance books, and specifically Earl of Her Dreams. It's like not actually spicy at all. I read it again as an adult and I was like, are they having sex? I don't know. But that is my favorite romance novel, and I think has been a type for me to like a map to follow a little bit where it's like, oh, there's romance and there's a little plot.
And there's a little blood. Where/how do you prefer to read?
Oof. I would love to say that I think a hard copy book, but I gotta be honest, this year has been all like e-reading.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love buying books, and I love reading books, but I think this year it's been really easy for me to consume e-reading books.
They are.
E-reader.
They're so easy to consume. It's such a convenient way. So here at Jace Reads Romance, we have this idea called comfy sexy. And it's that in your comfiest clothes, in your safest space, you can still explore your sexuality by reading a romance. When you hear comfy sexy, knowing what it means, what does that evoke for you?
In like terms of me being sexual or like me reading sexual?
Either or both. Like it
Okay,
could
I
be.
feel like
I
I phrased that
feel
weird.
comfy sexy is when I put on some silk pajamas and I slide into a like freshly made bed, or like when I'm reading something spicy around, like in public and nobody knows. Like whatever comfy sexy means to you.
I absolutely adore reading my romance books actually in the morning. So I like wake up and I do a little reading and it's very fun. So I think comfy sexy, I think of just woken up a little bleary eyed reading whatever I had like found and downloaded on my e-reader.
I love that. So separate from comfy sexy, when do you feel you're sexiest?
Ooh, honestly, when like my underwear matches my bra and
Oh, so real.
like I'll be like, wow, look at me. And I also have a nice silk robe that I like. So almost like that classic, like, the lady leaning in the doorway with a bottle of wine. It's like I slipped into something more comfortable.
Yes. Oh, that's so real. Now, final question. What is the one thing you would like women to know about sex, sexuality, like maybe your soapbox thing?
I think my soapbox thing is I want women and people who share maybe a similar expression to me, because I know that there's sex and people who start with sex are all experiencing it different ways. I think that I want people to, this is gonna sound, I don't know how to phrase this in a better way, but like play with themselves. I think it's really important to like get a toy and know what you like and and best to communicate those things. Cause I think like I love romance books, but there's also kind of this assumption sometimes in romance books that like everything's fine and he knows the exact right pace to do and he's so good with his fingers. But I think like my sexual relationship got really good with my partner when I knew what I wanted and I could effectively communicate to him that. So now there is less words in our relationship around what I want and what he wants because we both know that and we both took time to understand ourselves. So I think I'm just like, if you are out there exploring your sexual identity, find a toy that you feel comfortable with starting with and just like explore a little. Have some time to yourself and be like, ooh, what are these things? Like, I think knowing yourself helps you in those sexual relationships that you want to engage in the future.
Absolutely, yes. Y'all, I mentioned at the beginning that Wylie has her own podcast. Can you tell us more about All My Friends Are Reading if they want to hear more from you?
So All My Friends Are Reading are for the girlies who are busy bookworms. It's for anybody who would like to read it. I said the girlies best because I always just use girlies, but the girlies, the gays, the he's, the theys, like whatever you identify as, like you are welcome as a busy bookworm. So over here, if you are somebody who cannot read 251 books in a year, because we all do not read the speed that Jace reads, I made this podcast because I think there was a lot of books that I was missing out on, and I just wanted to know what they were about, but I didn't know if I wanted to like buy the book or wait 6 months from the library, and then all your holds come in at once, and you panic and you go So in this podcast, I tell my friend about a book that they've never heard before, and you get the whole plot. And we go through it as almost like what would you do in this situation? Like if you were the main character, like how are you feeling? And so the episodes range in length. Like I had an hour episode, I had an hour 42 episodes with Bride recently, which I was like, there's a lot of content. And it's like a 390-page book. This is crazy. So it's full of spoilers. It's to keep you in the know culturally. It is just a fun, silly time where you can listen to a book that maybe you were interested in, but you didn't know if you wanted to, read yourself. And we're currently on romance season.
Romance season. And we're trying to find a book that I haven't read.
That was, I was like in my bookshelf and you were like, read. I was like looking at your Instagram and I was like, read.
I know. I've read a lot of the books, which is like fine. Which is my job.
Yeah.
Which is my job. So that's the point of that. Where on the internets can they find you? And don't worry, I'll put all of these links in the show notes. But All My Friends Are Reading, anywhere you listen to podcasts,
Anywhere's podcast. All my friends are reading on Instagram and TikTok, which is mostly just me posting memes. And we also do have a Facebook page. All my friends are reading.
Ooh, fun. All of those will be in the show notes, and I hope y'all had as much fun listening to this that you go read Dark City Omega. Maybe you'll read the second book before I do. So let me know how it is. And I cannot wait to see what we decide to do for book club next. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for today, y'all. This has been a Three Paws Productions podcast. Our producer is Sephi. Michael Achenbach is our patient editor. Our theme song is written and performed by Diana Weishauer. You can find show notes and so much more at jacereadsromance.com. That's JAYCE Reads Romance. Follow along on TikTok and Instagram at Jace Reads Romance. If you'd like to ask a question or share a story for the podcast, call and leave a message at 661-JACE-RR. That's 661-529-2377. Or send an email to jace@jacereadsromance.com. Finally, like and subscribe so you can get every episode when they drop. You can also leave us a review to help others find us. And remember, this is Jace holding space for you.